Thank you so much, Jack, Dr. Liu. Appreciate that introduction, and I'm delighted to be here to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the passing of Rachel Carson, the conservationist who is credited with launching the modern global environmental movement. But today I want to talk about some of the progress that has occurred over the time that has passed since then. For instance, today we have 194 countries that are signatories to a goal of net zero global carbon emissions by the end of the century. And we have so many technological advances that are rapidly reshaping, for instance, the electricity and transportation sectors, and the way we heat and cool and use buildings. And agriculture, we've been enabling climate smart practices to reduce fertilizer use and emissions and to store carbon. In the forest sector, we have new forest products that store carbon in useful materials, and we have carbon offset markets that provide carbon credits that can be sold to the highest bidder. So there's a lot that has transpired. Many solutions are at hand, but it seems that even with these better and cheaper solutions, the scale of the problem of climate change just keeps getting bigger. And one of the problems, in my opinion, is that we have encyclopedias of solutions, but we don't have roadmaps for communities. The development of local roadmaps of solutions is the challenge and the opportunity that I want to talk with you about today. And just as a glimpse of what you'll be hearing about, you can take a look at the list of partners and sponsors who have assisted with my work here in the state of Georgia. They include, most importantly, the Racy Anderson Foundation, which has been sponsoring my work for the past 6 years, along with partners all across the state of Georgia from universities and community organizations. So you'll hear more about that as we proceed. But staying somewhat global, let's talk a little bit, just because we want to contextualize this need. I love the periodic publications of NOAA maps. In this case, we're looking at the global climate change and the warming that's occurring. August 2024, just a month ago, was the 15th consecutive record warm month since 1850, since a time that records were officially kept. And if you look at the locations where the climate change damage is likely to occur, now zeroing in on the United States, you can see that virtually no region is left unscathed. And the Southeast region in particular is forecast to have significant damages caused by climate change if we do not change our lifestyles and our emissions. The project that I'm summarizing here is an analysis of the impact of climate change in the last 2 decades of this century under a high emissions scenario, essentially if we continue on the pathway that we're currently on. And if you look at the Southeast region, you can see that in that last couple decades, about 10 to 20% of the GDP will be lost to damages from climate change. So there's a major motivation for us to tackle this problem both globally and across the US. At the same time, it's sort of ironic that the Southeast is becoming a clean energy manufacturing hub. It's emerging as a test bed for demonstrating and deploying technologies. So we have, for instance, If you look at every dot on this map, there's at least $1 million that's been committed by the the current administration's climate programs, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act. All of that, about $500 billion worth of investment, is going out currently and being spent in new projects around the U.S. And up until as current as our numbers are, 47% of that funding has gone to the Southeast. So we are becoming something of a Detroit of electric vehicles. We have the largest solar manufacturing plant in the Western Hemisphere in the state of Georgia. A lot going on. But at the same time, the state of Georgia is not adopting these solutions for its own use. If you look at solar on rooftops or EVs on the highways, we have a lower than average percentage of adoption. So we have our own challenges here, much to be done to try to move the Southeast and the state of Georgia along toward greater investment in climate solutions. I want to focus on Georgia because we've been working very hard at trying to design schemes for working with communities that are replicable across the US and really been also shared globally and adopted by countries and communities in many other countries. We got started back in 2018 when the US didn't have many state climate action plans. Certainly there were none in the Southeast. Georgia did not have a state climate action plan. And so in the absence of government leadership, we worked to develop a grassroots project called Drawdown Georgia, which is a state version of the Drawdown Project, which is an international effort to reduce emissions globally. And this has been led by Paul Hawken. But in the Drawdown compendium of solutions, I mentioned how many encyclopedias we have. This is a great encyclopedia of 100 solutions to tackle climate change across the globe. We asked, well, which one of those would work in the state of Georgia? And the first year of research that we conducted in this collaboration across universities in the state put those 100 global solutions through a series of filters to localize them, asking the question, first of all, are they market ready? Because we were wanting to orient our work to the near term, to the 2030 period, rather than the 2050 goal, which was the Drawdown International timeline. And then we also wanted to know for each of these 100, was there local experience? Could there be a meaningful impact? Is it affordable, competitive with alternatives in already in the marketplace? And then what about equity, jobs, health, and other social values that go beyond carbon reduction? What are the other impacts that each of these technologies would have in the state of Georgia? And the result of that analysis produced kind of a filtering methodology where for each of the 100 technologies, we asked, what's its technical potential? So for instance, there's a tropical rainforest solution in the global Paul Hawken compendium. Well, that's not going to work in Georgia. But what about the technical potential, for instance, for recycling? If we look at that, we thought perhaps 95% of disposable recyclable materials would be a reasonable maximum technical potential, or all of the rooftops in the state of Georgia facing south or flat would be another, and without shade would be another estimate of a technical potential for a solution. And then we looked at, well, what's the baseline forecast for each of these technologies? What's going to happen if no additional effort or no new policies were to occur? You know, what's the trajectory that we're on? Is it a slow rate of improvement, or is it declining, competing and being moved out of the marketplace? So for each of these, we did a baseline forecast and then arrived at an achievable potential, which is, of course, in between the green and the red on this three-dimensional box here, which we've declared to be a realistic scenario, considering costs, impacts, stakeholder acceptance, and greater commitment to success. We were working with community organizations throughout this process, such as the Partnership for Southern Equity and the South Space Energy Institute, and GreenLink Analytics. The result of our effort was the identification of 20 top high-impact climate solutions for the state of Georgia. And they're shown here by sector. We tackled electricity, buildings, farm and ag, forestry, and transportation. Those are the 5 sectors shown here. And then we had our beyond carbon filters as well. Probably no surprises to you, but one common feature is that many of these involve electrification of the economy. Electric vehicles, electric heat pumps, putting solar on rooftops, combined heat and power. More and more electricity being used is part of what we recommended in our 20 technologies. This is the last of sort of the forecasting slides I have here. It's called a carbon abatement curve. So on the vertical axis, you have the cost of these 20 solutions in terms of dollars per ton carbon averted. And then along the horizontal axis, you have the amount of carbon that can be reduced at that average cost. And you can see the least cost option here is to reduce food waste, which would reduce about 2 or 3 million tons of CO2 in Georgia. One of the biggest impacts was large-scale solar, which at the time we estimated to have a small cost associated with it, given the intermittency of solar and the need for storage, which does require additional investment. And then electric vehicles also strategic bet at that point, good strategic bet, modest cost, significant impact. So we have no regret actions, everything below the line saves you money, and then strategic bets slightly above the line, but likely we think directionally to be able to pay for themselves eventually. I won't get into this slide in too much detail, but I'm sure you're all wondering, well, how do you consider the synergies of 20 solutions that could be implemented together and perhaps affect the impact of each of them? So we could talk, for instance, about the synergy of having electric vehicles here at the same time that we have a large push on solar or demand response to be able to have customers reduce emissions when needed. So this, the green link between electric vehicles and large-scale solar and demand response are examples of synergies. So when you combine all of that, you get more than you would if you just put electric vehicles onto the grid in its current high carbon fuel production system. So all of that's done. I've got references to much of this work that you can find in the last page of this presentation, which will be posted or is available. So that was our planning for our 20 solutions that drove us for about 5 years. And once we identified our 20 solutions, we began to interact with the business community to see who would sign up to assist in implementing these 20 solutions. And the Georgia Tech School of Business and the Ray C. Anderson Center of Sustainable Business in that school created a first of a kind state business compact where 60 companies located in Georgia agreed to support the target of net zero by 2050 in Georgia, participate in collaborative initiatives to annually report on their activities and contribute resources to sustain the compact. So you'll recognize many of these compact members, big companies and small. And they have all signed up and are very active to this day, meeting and talking in person and online. It's really a wonderful experience. I hope it can be replicated. So I want to now turn to some of the products and research that we've been doing to figure out how to bring the use and adoption and benefits of all these technologies to bigger scale in the state of Georgia. And so I'm going to tell you about two trackers that we've developed. One is called an emissions tracker, and the other is a solutions tracker. I mean, obviously, you've got to track where you've been and where you're going in order to know how well you're doing. So we created a emissions tracker for the state of Georgia, which has its goal of providing local, timely, and accessible emissions information. Here, this is a diagram of the 159 counties in Georgia. It's an interesting state, the second largest number of counties in the country. Gives you a pretty good resolution. We're now also moving to a city emission, several hundred cities now being tracked, although that I can't show you that yet because it's going to be rolled out in December. So stay tuned. The tracker here is available online for all of you. And I noticed just last month that a individual working for the Atlanta Regional Commission took the tracker data and created a story. It was published and got some good press in the media about emissions patterns that they uncovered by looking at our tracker. So the best flat imitation is the best flattery, right? So glad that others are looking at our data as well. And so the conclusion of this analysis was that between 2013 and 2023, the emissions of Georgia have moved to a higher proportion of transportation relative to commercial and residential buildings. So as is happening across the US, transportation has become the largest emitter of carbon emissions, and residential and commercial are slightly lower in their emissions. So the solutions tracker is also under development, but available for you to try here. This is an effort to try to promote imitation and we call it persuasion by identifying what cities and counties are on the leading edge of adopting our 20 solutions. So we want to highlight these bright spots. We want to identify the drivers that are producing them. We want to empower others to use them, to track equity, and to inspire imitation and persuasion. So those are our goals. And this is sort of a little diagram of how the tracker has been structured. So when you first arrive on the page, you'll see a choice between the 5 sectors. Do you want to look at solutions in electricity or transportation, for instance? And I'm just going to show you, if you do turn to electricity, then you can look at the details of 5 solutions that we have information on in our tracker. So we have a demand response, rooftop solar, large-scale solar, landfill methane, and cogeneration. So let's keep going. Let's talk about a couple of these electric solutions that we have been mapping. The way the tracker is organized, we have our solutions mapped over on the left. And then on the right, we have a set of comparison variables that will be helpful in understanding the location of where you find the solutions on the left. So we call these comparison variables. And if we look at heat pumps, you'll see a very good distribution of these technologies across the state, in particular in the rural areas, which swing across what we call the Black Belt of Georgia. Here's Atlanta, not so much in Atlanta. Again, if we look at the comparison variable, here we're looking at what fuels households use to heat their homes. And in the Atlanta metropolitan area, which is a very large, dominant metro in the state of Georgia, we don't see a great deal of heat pump adoption. So this is a really interesting phenomenon, that the future of the mini split new Mitsubishi Fujitsu heat pumps that are so spectacular and such a great solution for the future is going to take a while to move into metropolitan areas that have already committed homes to natural gas heating. It's just like natural gas stoves. Once you've got that stove, it's hard to go to the inductive stovetop electric option that's so much cleaner and better for the environment. So that was one of the lessons that we learned from tracking the location of heat pumps. This is a picture of our tracker, and these are my conclusions. Heat pumps are constrained by natural gas heating. I think I've got 4 of these I want to share with you. Let's take a look at electric vehicles. So EVs are urban and infrastructure constrained. They need charging ports so that their owners can charge them when driving through the state. If you look at where you find electric vehicles in the state currently, Atlanta, Macon, Savannah, some of the biggest cities, Augusta, stand out, but particularly Atlanta. And if you look at the location of charging ports, you don't see quite the same concentration in Atlanta, but you do see a correlation, very high correlation between EVs per capita by county and charging ports. So here we see an infrastructure constraint and an urban constraint too. Lots of reasons for the urban constraint. It's easier to develop chargers when you have a high density urban area, but also I think in the urban areas you can promote the diffusion of some of these technologies more effectively too, because you're not the isolated single adopter of one of these. There you can club, you can see from in information sharing and peer experiences what it's like to have a car. One thing we did learn, electric vehicles here in Georgia, was that it is a wealth-driven opportunity, but of course, wealth is not the only um, predictor. We were looking mostly at variables such as median household income here. You can see on the right side. And that had a pretty strong correlation, but not a perfect correlation. We began to look at as researchers do, what are the anomalies? And we found two counties, Rayburn and Greene counties, that had many more EVs than we would have expected. And voila, we discovered a second home market in these resort areas in the mountains of Georgia and areas around here with beautiful lakeside second home development. So yes, wealth was a correlate, but it was better measured as percent high income households than median household income by county. So that's something to learn, and hopefully a useful lesson for those who are wanting to promote electric vehicles. So let's talk about demand response. So this is an instance where households or even businesses can get onto um, um, time of use or real-time uh, electricity rates that reward you for using more electricity off-peak than on-peak. So here we have a very unusual distribution of adoption of demand response. Because our main largest provider of electricity in Georgia, which is the Georgia Power Company, does not have an expansive demand response program, the areas that it serves directly have less adopters than the areas that are being served currently by electric co-ops. So we have an unusual pattern, somewhat unpredicted, of adoption of demand response across rural areas and suburban areas, and not as much in the urban concentration. So that was an interesting um, finding. And then last, let's look at rooftop solar. This is by far the most concentrated solution in the state of Georgia of those that we've mapped. It has the highest inequality index, and I'll talk with you about that in just as a last topic in this seminar. The concentration is principally, and again, the largest cities, Macon, Augusta, Savannah, and of course, Atlanta. And it is highly correlated with percent urban areas because, of course, the technical potential is greatest where you have a lot of rooftops on, and of course, that's where you have urban areas and buildings. So that was just a survey of 4 of our 30 or so technologies that we have mapped, all focused on the 20 categories of solutions that we previously identified. As another way to characterize the maps, we use a Gini coefficient, which is a measure of equity. So the Gini coefficient is a ratio of the area under the equality line uh, and between the equality line and the solutions adoption line, which in this case is for heat pumps, where you see that as you go across 159 counties, adding a little bit more of the cumulative households in each, you're adding almost a smooth and equal number of heat pump adoptions, almost a perfect equity equality. So A over A plus B in this case is 0.22. The difference here is 22% of the triangle of created here. Take a look at rooftop solar. In contrast, it has the largest inequality index, Gini coefficient, and you can see why. There are about a third of the counties in the state of Georgia that don't have any rooftop solar or negligible. And then when you get to the wealthier urban areas, the rate climbs. So equity is always on our mind. Um, I started off by saying we needed to figure out what was happening in the state and look at emissions, look at opportunities. That's an ongoing effort, partly because in 2021 and 2, we had a paradigm shift. I should say shift, not shirt. That paradigm shift occurred because of the administration's initiatives that put in place significant subsidies and new regulations to promote many of our solutions. So much more can happen with all of that support now in place. And looking to the future, we've extended our planning horizon to 2035 and have added some new solutions. The 20 are now being supplemented by some that look very promising: sustainable aviation fuels, cement, new alternative cement, mass timber. Here, this is the carbon capture and use figure, sustainable energy there, hydrogen, small modular reactors. I didn't have a picture of those to show, but these are 6 areas that we think are going to benefit from major breakthroughs and market advancement over the next 10 years. So the road ahead, my last slide, involves launching our solutions tracker in December of 2024. You've seen it now 2 months in advance, so pleased to share early, always looking for feedback. We've have plans to expand our reach to more communities, particularly with this new city emissions tracker, and hopefully one day with a city solutions tracker. We need to extend our lifetime and portfolio of solutions over the next few years and demonstrate how communities can work together to dial down carbon emissions. So I want to end with a photo of our team. This was during a meeting last May at the Candida building at Georgia Tech. They come from all of those universities you saw on my cover slide, and with support from the Racy Anderson Foundation. Wanted to end on a positive note about community action, which is where we began this discussion. We are not passive victims of climate change. We have agency, as they call it, because we can make a difference. We have freedom of speech, which we can use to help get more people to pitch in And we have tools and technologies and the skills and the talent to dial down on carbon emissions. Like Rachel Carson did at the dawn of the environmental movement. Let's work together to exploit opportunities and turn them into realities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Brown, for your really fantastic lecture. It's very informative, insightful, and inspiring. Now it's time for questions. Again, the audience is welcome to post the questions in the Q&A box. And I see already some questions there. So I will start with the first one. Let's see. You gave an excellent example of Georgia analysis. The question is from Logan Carson. He asked, have other states, particularly those in the Southeast, done a similar analysis to Georgia's roadmap of 20 climate solutions? If they have, do they identify the solution differ significantly, or are there a lot of common features between different states?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. And we have talked with, I would say, someone from every state in the Southeast about what we're doing. And many of them have asked if they could copy what we've done and could we help them. We always say, yes, of course. But then having had the opportunity less than a year ago to gather several hundred people at Georgia Tech across 7 southeastern states, members of the state energy offices and universities, there was a general sense that the solutions are common to states across the Southeast. We talked a great deal about that. And I think that that sense of commonality means that it's probably easier to just look at what we've done and consider perhaps a few adaptations than to start again. Although we have had a number of people wanting to start again. We just spoke a week or two ago with some folks from Brussels wanting to do something for their metropolitan area or for Belgium. We've spoken with people all over. So thank you.
Well, that's great. The next question is from an anonymous attendee. The question is, when looking at either emission or solution, is biking or alternative forms of transportation used? Or is it only electric cars? In
No.
addition, yeah, okay. In addition, would it be possible to calculate emission patterns between workers and the distance traveled to work?
All right. Yeah, we had Dr. Fay from Georgia State University do a analysis of electric bikes and biking in general for us. So our alternative transportation is one of the 20 solutions. And within alternative transportation, we have um, uh, remote work, walking to work, biking, electric bikes, and I think I'm forgetting 1 or 2 other things that fall in there. But biking has been an enormous focus because the state of Georgia, I forgot to mention, can you see my slide?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Peach State Voluntary Emissions Reduction Plan, that's the Georgia Climate Action Plan that was published just about 4 months ago. We worked under contract with the state of Georgia to assist with their climate reduction emissions reduction plan. And one of their high priority solutions was electric bikes. So yes, electric bikes has gotten a lot of our attention, and it is one of the solutions that we've mapped. So if I had a minute, I'd go back and bring that website up and go to transportation, alternative solutions, and biking. But you can do that. So if you have a chance, take a look and see what we've done. Is there a way to estimate solutions from biking? There emission reductions from biking. Yes, I've seen it done in the literature. We've have made some progress on that, but not can't direct you to anything published yet to date by us.
Great.
By
Thank
our,
you so, yeah. Thank you. So the next question is from Tom Dees. He said, your work, as always, is very impressive, both conceptually and in practice. He had two parts of the questions here. The first part is, we have often found that the hardest thing to estimate was implementation feasibility, or in your terms, stakeholder acceptance. Are you all doing research on this, or can you point to those who have done such research? And what approaches are being used? I'm particularly struck by the importance of social networks in shaping implementation feasibility, which you noted in discussing electric vehicles. You want to answer this one first before I go to the second part?
Sure. Well, I'm so delighted to be receiving a question from Tom Dietz. I cite your work, Tom, all the time. And we have used a lot of your concepts from social psychology in our work. We did a survey of 1,800 households in Georgia, have published on what we found on willingness to pay and on the role of knowledge, even the role of party affiliation, and what role does that play? I'd love to share that with you. I didn't include any of that on my bibliography, but I should have, because that has been a thrust. As you know, it's been a great interest to me in my career, how people make decisions. And you're absolutely correct that the diffusion of information and imitation, imitation is the, I think the economists say the most important motivator or something. I've forgotten the cute term there, but anyway, yes, and knowledge is not enough. It's got to be delivered, as you know, in ways that by information sources that are trusted and in ways that are meaningful. It doesn't make a lot of difference to most people to know that this is a great thing for new jobs. You're going to create millions of dollars of benefits for the state, or 100,000 jobs. Those numbers don't move people. It's got to be personal, information about people in their situation, and how these solutions can be viable and important and practical for them. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but would love to talk with you about it sometime.
Great. His second part of the question is that in the track system, is it feasible to track not by engineering sectors, but by decision makers, such as households, government, nonprofit organizations like schools, hospitals, and private sector, and so on.
So we have solutions, about 30 of them tracked now. And because, for instance, when you talk about a solution like retrofitting buildings, which is one of our top 20, that in fact is an activity that involves many different decision makers and many different actions. So we took a look at the use of Energy Star ratings and LEED ratings on commercial buildings across the state. And those decisions are made by schools. We look particularly at schools that had a LEED or Energy Star rating, as well as corporate owners and the builders of these buildings. So there are a variety of different decision makers, and it's really important when you look at any one of these to walk through who is the key influencer and whose decision ultimately needs to change in order to adopt something new. So I like your question, because we do need to pay more attention, and maybe instead of, I was looking at electric gadgets that are adopted by households in my 4 examples, but we could look at those things that are adopted by companies or corporate entities as an alternative, or those things that are adopted by government agencies, such as school buses, which we've tracked, as well as school efficiency labeling. So thank you. That's a great next step. I can see a grad student paying some attention to that on my behalf in future months.
Yeah, great. Thank you. The next question is from Donzel. His question is also related to the track system. He said that the track system is fantastic. Would you please share the data collection approach and updating frequencies? And how often do you update the track system?
Everything about the emissions tracker is pretty much in place and well documented, because we released that about a year ago, and we update every month. So you'll find new data on it on a monthly basis, and we release it as on the tracker itself. So you can go to the tracker and ask for a download of the data over a period of time for particular counties, a whole state, or in different ways. We don't have that yet established for our solutions tracker. It's a little bit more difficult. We're not going to be able to update every month, that's for sure. Some things we can't even update every year. We have to wait for the next census of agriculture, for instance, for some of the climate smart ag practices, which I didn't have a chance to talk about. But yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a clean response to you on the solutions tracker, but we should be further along when we release it in December with plans for data access and documentation.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is from anonymous attendees. The question is, do you have any evidence to show that these great carbon mitigation initiatives at communities have influences on the residents' health? Thanks.
On residents' health. We are not conducting research on that particular question, which would require knowledge of who's adopting and what has occurred in their homes following. But we certainly track the literature and have in the environmental management paper that's shown in the last page of the PowerPoint, where I have references, that's got a pretty good review of the literature on the link between climate smart practices and health. We also did a follow-up, I should have put that on my list, of equity and health issues. And that's in a report that we did. I'll have to anyway, it's you can send me a note and I'll send you a reference to that. But that isn't really our primary research area. We just try to keep up with what other people are doing, because we certainly don't want any of our solutions to be ones that result in health or safety or any other major security problems. We're looking a lot at impacts on energy bills and energy burden and the benefits of reducing energy expenditures by using technologies that with assistance you can purchase and then draw down your energy bills as a percent of your living expenses. And that is a tremendous implementer of better health and more productive lives, happier people.
Great, thank you. You know, the United Nations has been adopting this 17 Sustainable Development Goals. One of them is related to climate. And of course, the implementation of those goals need to be at the national level as well as the state and the local level. So you mentioned this 20 climate solutions. How sufficient would be for those 20 climate solutions to help Georgia reach the sustainable development goal, like 13 at the at the state level by
Yes, so
2030? Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to spend a lot of time on this graph, which shows where the emissions. Are you able to see my pointer when I do this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Right.
So we had about 40 million tons of carbon sequestered in our forests. So that's not shown here. But then when you take that as a net emissions of total emissions minus sequestration, the budget for Georgia was an emissions of about 129 million tons of CO2 equivalent in the year 2018. In the year 2005, which is the baseline year for the Paris Accord, for instance, the emissions in Georgia were, the net emissions were 156. So between 2005 and 2018, the state dropped its emissions considerably. But we forecast a continuing adoption, with continuing adoption of these solutions with the IRA and other sources of financing that will drop emissions in Georgia by 41% relative to 2005 in the year 2030. But we think it's possible with Drawdown Georgia and all the activities that have been sponsored by it to further reduce beyond the Paris Accord goal by 57% relative to the baseline in 2005 of 156 million tons. So going from 156 million tons to something like 67. Yes, we're tracking what we think is going to happen if we just go away, and what could happen as we continue our program. And these, by the way, the state plans, the state climate action plan has used our forecasted emissions out to 2050, which we've done with great care using the National Energy Modeling System, which is a computable general equilibrium model, and the very best that one can use, although there are alternatives. Everyone has their favorite modeling program.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. The next question from Michael Rory. He asked, does regional weather event result in a more rapid adoption of solution through rebuilding?
I can't help but think, Michael, that is a great question and must surely be the case, because so many of these solutions are difficult to promote when you have an operating system with the old technology that hasn't yet broken, right? So when you end up with a lot of homes and factories and a transportation system that has to be rebuilt, you have the opportunity to start from a clean slate and look forward to new technologies. I don't think that always happens. Hurricane Katrina is an example where the rebuilding was not as efficiently done, not done with as much efficiency in mind and renewables as could have been the case. I hope that the rebuild from our current Hurricane Helene will do better. But that is an opportunity. You're right. We need to take advantage of this moment in time following events such as Hurricane Helene and others across the country. Good point.
Yeah, thank you so much. The presentation and the Q&A are so interesting, but we have run out of time. So Professor Brown, thank you so much again for your wonderful lecture and answers to the questions. Also want to thank the audience for the active participation. Here we have to say goodbye now, everyone. So see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Bye.